Hi folks, this is To Be Entertained. I'm Michael. We're outside of a Dick's Sporting Goods and we're going to look over some of their fishing supplies and talk about some beginner tips for buying fishing gear and what you're going to use each lure for, what you're going to use each piece of equipment for. So enjoy. Hey folks. All right, so Dick's Sporting Goods started quite a while ago as a fishing shop, but unfortunately now they're kind of phasing out the fishing section in some locations, which is a shame considering the history of this bait and tackle shop that's now become a major sports equipment company. So we're going to go and take a look inside and see what they have here at this location. Unfortunately, other locations do not have quite as much material, quite as much product as this one does. So we're going to go take a look at some of their stuff. So we're going to go and check out some of the rods and reels first. So first off, not quite starter, but nearly starter. Here, I'm getting hooked up, but Zebco is your classic fishing pole company. Everyone knows what a Zebco is. Similar to how everyone knows what a Shakespeare is. These are going to come standard with your own Zebco reel as well as the rod, so you're not going to have to buy them individually. Spinning reels, great for your first time. This one's only about $45, so that's an excellent deal for this quality of a medium heavy pole. Okay, and moving down, this is more advanced things. If you're buying custom rods that don't have a reel with them, you would end up getting reels separately. Like for example, I have on my ultralight this here Fluger President spinning reel, which is going to be about $70, but that's more advanced. You're not going to be spending that kind of money if you're just starting out, right? Now, in this section, you've got all of the lines. So you have different test weights on here. So you have a 6-pound test here. That means that it's tested to withstand 6 pounds of pressure, right? And once you get into like the heavier stuff, if you're fishing for like say pike or muskie, you're going to want more of that as well. You're going to want a heavier test as well as a leader likely. And also for those types of fish, you would want to get braid. Now, I don't typically fish for those because the braid is not, not something I need every day, right? I don't fish for pike or muskie around here. I'm usually largemouth bass, smallmouth bass, crappie, that kind of thing. Don't need a braid. I've actually cut my finger on a braid while fishing in a swamp and got sepsis from it. So just be careful taking braid off if you use braid rather than mono. So we can move on. Now, if you're just starting out, live bait like worms, shiners, mullets, that kind of thing, that's what you're going to want, because it's a lot easier to catch fish with live bait. Now, the selection here isn't awesome, but just for educational purposes, these come with soil. This one actually has mold in it, and I'm not entirely sure if, oh, we got a little bit of activity in there, but no, I'm not. Yeah, so these are night crawlers. Nice thick worms. These look fairly healthy. So you would be using these with a lead, a weight, and what in the South we would call a cork, also known as a bobber. And those are great for any kind of fish. You're going to catch anything from catfish to bass to brim. By brim, I mean like bluegill and green sunfish. Anything in the sunfish family will eat those. Now you've also got red worms in here. These tend to be a little bit thicker, but apparently not as big as those night crawlers, and also not as active. And so when you hook these, you want to hook them through. You want to hook them around the heart, and I usually double hook them. That keeps them alive in the water for longer. They're easier to deal with. Now, in the South, we also have a type called wigglers, which are my preference. They're smaller worms, but they're a lot more active. And so you get fish's attention more easily, right? Okay, moving on to when I was talking about having lead or a weight on the line. If you're fishing with live bait, you want one of these split shots here, right? They're nowadays they're a lot easier to remove because they've got this little piece on the back here. So if you want to remove the weight, all you have to do is pinch in. Whereas when you want to close the weight around the line, you're going to use pliers or something like that to get it solid on there. That allows the line at the end of the weight to actually float up so that the worm remains suspended in the water rather than just sitting on the bottom and not doing anything. Now, we've got a huge selection of weights, right? Just a gigantic selection. So, like, this would be more for, like, say, catfish fishing. Something if you're in deeper water and you want to have it sit on the bottom and you're using heavier bait or a heavier line, something like that. And when you're fishing with live bait, I have a very strong preference for a certain type of hook, but it's not on this side. These are all swivels. That's going to be a little bit more advanced for someone who's just starting out fishing. You don't really need those if you're doing freshwater stuff. All right, moving on, we've got what a lot of people would call bobbers. Now, when I grew up, they were called corks, and they usually looked like this because they were made out of cork. So instead of calling them a bobber, we'd call them a cork. But a lot of people really like these plastic bobbers because they're easy to snap on. Whereas these, you've got this little plastic piece right here. The line goes through, you press this in, and the line is now tight. That cork is an indicator of when a fish is biting. So when you're looking at your line, you're going to see this in the water, and once that dips below the surface, you know that there's a little bit of activity on your line. Maybe time to set the hook at that point. Once it goes entirely underneath the water, that's when you're setting the hook for sure. Okay, we'll do the soft baits in a little bit, but I want to talk about the hooks real quick. So my personal preference, if you're fishing for panfish, you want these plan shank size 8 eagle claw hooks. Eagle claw is the best in the business when it comes to hooks, but that's my opinion. A lot of people may not like eagle claw as much as I do, but I think they're great. If you're fishing for bass, you want more like a size 1. Right, or a 1/0. I mean, the size 8 is more for panfish, especially with live bait. I'm more of a lure fisherman, but I grew up fishing with live bait, and those are my favorites. I was also influenced by my grandmother, who taught me how to fish on that one. Now, if we're talking about these lures over here, hollow-bodied frogs. Excellent. I almost always have one on one of my rods. They're great for bass fishing. The hollow body allows it to float on top of the water. You don't get any snags or anything like that. But the issue is that the fish has to actually bite down pretty hard on it to actually reveal the hooks so that they can be caught. These whopper ploppers over here, that's what these are called. Those are for larger bass or things like pike or muskie. And then these are just your standard poppers. You can catch any larger species of fish. And now with these are going to be crankbaits. They're all going to dive down the faster you reel or the more you pull up on the rod, right? So these are extremely versatile. If you're in a large lake, then those are going to be something you're going to go to. If you're in shallower water, though, you want these jerk baits. They're really great topwater baits, and they attract fish, especially aggressive predator fish, very easily. And these smaller ones are excellent for panfish. I don't prefer using treble hooks because if you actually catch something and it's moving around a lot, sometimes one of those treble hooks can get hooked in your knuckle, which is something that I've experienced before. And I try to avoid them. But, I mean, go for it if you want. And these are also smaller jerk baits and things like that. Lures that you would use in shallower bodies of water. Now, for my favorite part, since I am a big-time panfish angler, love a good beetle spin. These things will catch any bluegill, any crappie. They're great. No wonder that they've been so popular for, like, I don't know, 50 years or something like that. And then also, I really love, if I'm trying to jig, I really love the trout magnet lures. You've got tons of different colors, and even, I've bought one of these before, even if you want it, they've got several hooks, several different colors. You can get started with that if you're new to jigging. And this doesn't just catch trout now, this catches any panfish as well. So I've caught more species on this type of lure than any other type of lure. And now you've also got rooster tails, which kind of serve the same purpose. You're catching mostly panfish with these, especially crappie. They love them. So you've got a huge rooster tail selection right here. And now, another thing you've got a lot of spoons here. Small spoons like this are great for panfish as well. Even smaller bass will bite those. But then again, bass will bite nearly anything that they can fit in their mouth. And so, yeah, this whole thing is just rooster tails and spoons. Now, if we want to get into the jigs over here, obviously, if you're familiar with fishing already, then you've heard of these larger jigs. Strike King makes tons of them. And these are also weedless because they've got this plastic piece right here that prevents a lot of the issues with hang-ups, like getting caught on logs or rocks. And then with these are your vibrating jigs. They've got this spoon on top, so they kind of like shake in the water like that. It creates a lot of movement, and it really attracts a lot of fish, like especially really aggressive fish that haven't been pressured recently. Yeah, those are great. And then we've got spinner baits over here. Now, spinner baits are one of the most popular baits to use, especially the smaller ones, because like I said, as long as a bass can fit it in its mouth, it's going to bite. And with the larger ones, you're targeting larger fish, but with the smaller ones, you can still catch them. But extremely popular, but the most popular are soft baits, and there's an extensive selection of soft baits over here, including right here. These are little grub jigs, so you can attach like a jig head to these and you know, jig it essentially like you would any other jig. But then things like this big, you're fishing for like muskie or something in the something in like the brackish water, like in a bay. Big section, right? So this is like a craw, a small craw. Those are really great. If you've got a weight on them, you can jig them just across the bottom, especially if the bottom is rocky. It really attracts the fish. And like, I'm not familiar with this brand, but those are do-nothing worms. Or in the South, we call them do-nothing worms. But yeah, you could also call them stick baits. Yeah, and then we've got your finesse worms, and then of course you've got your frogs. These are some of my favorites right here. Love a frog bait, love a soft frog. They're excellent. I've caught I've caught 2 10-pound bass in one day on soft frogs. So I highly recommend using those. The difficulty is setting the hook on those because it's not easy. You actually have to wait a few seconds after the fish hits on top of the water to set the hook, because that first hit that the fish does on top of the water, that first blow up, that's just to stun the frog. Then they come back around and grab it, so you've got to wait just a second and a half. But then, yeah, you've got stick baits from Yamamoto, obviously very famous and very successful company. I prefer these darker stick baits over some of the stranger colored ones. Blue with red flecks is also good. Same thing with all of these. You've got more craws over here. But most of this is all soft plastic. Most of it's stick baits, to be honest. You can also hook them wacky style, like hook the worm in the middle and just kind of jig it just slowly, and that really is effective at catching fish. Okay, moving on. Here we've got power bait. So this company is extremely effective with making baits that will catch trout, especially if you're putting it on the bottom. Now, it'll also catch carp, which I don't typically target, but I actually have this particular type sitting in my car console right now. I haven't had much luck with it, but a lot of people do. But this is usually for catching trout, and I'm not a big trout fisherman. So if you do like catching trout, then obviously you're going to know what this brand is. Now, this is all Guggen stuff, which has come out in the past like 5 years or so, and it's just kind of taken the industry by storm. Just because of their internet presence. They have extremely good marketing, and people buy Guggen all the time. I am not a huge fan of them, but I have used some of their baits, and I've had little success. That's not a dig at Guggen, but it's not my thing. So now we're moving into some of the larger baits, except for I will recommend these storm baits for bass fishing. These are great. They look extremely accurate, and I've had a lot of luck with these, and my fiance has as well. Someone who has not had a lot of fishing experience, but she managed to catch her very first bass on one of these. So they're excellent. And then we've got a few more larger lures or larger hooks. See, these circle lures, these are going to be used with like cut squid and things like that, like something that you're sinking down to the bottom, especially if you're in salt water, right? So a circle hook is something that you're going to, instead of like setting the hook like you would with using lures, if you're using cut bait like that, you're just pulling up, and the circle is actually allowing you to hook that fish that's feeding on the bottom. And these things are obviously just going to be used for offshore. You're not going to be using that doing freshwater like I usually do. And these are similar to spoons. They're reflective, which mimics shine off of a bait fish. I would usually just use these in like a bay, brackish water. All right. Now we've got more soft plastics over here, but these are gulp baits, so they're covered in this scented liquid. It's going to take a long time for you to get it off your hands. A lot of people swear by this stuff. I've never had a whole lot of success with them, but you're going to have to wash your hands like 10 times if you're going to get that stank off of them. Then you've got, more poppers, more, a larger bait for offshore or like brackish water fishing. Oh, and then you've also, Gulp also makes a scented spray that you can use on whatever bait you're using. And all of these are fish attractants, right? So I actually have never used the bait fuel, and honestly, I'm not entirely sure if it works, but I mean, it's worth a shot. Okay, and so you've got more leaders over here. These are going to be for fish that have teeth rather than like bass, which just have pads. This is going to be for something a little bit spicier. More soft plastics, same old thing here as well. Large hooks for attaching a saltwater soft plastic. And these are all saltwater as well. And then if you're really into using scented lures, you can use these. They are entirely saturated in that scent, and they are likely fairly good at attracting fish. Then obviously you've got your nets. If you're just starting out, you're not going to need a net for a fish. You can probably just land it by picking it up, depending on what you are trying to catch. If you're trying to catch something, say, that's got teeth on it that you can't actually pull it out of the water, then yes, you would be using something like that, more so like this. But with things like bass and all panfish, you're never going to need to use a net usually, unless they're just absolutely massive and it's a last resort. And same kind of thing with these. Just your typical swim baits, you know. These look excellent. I might actually try this brand soon. I've never tried the Tsunami brand, but yeah, same swim baits. If you're fly fishing, you're gonna want some waders, right? If you're fishing in some water where you're not actually going to need waders, you could use these boots here. And a lot of people like to use this little vest, especially if they're wading out in the water and fly fishing. Now, if you're offshore or in brackish water, like in a bay or something, you can use this cut squid, or these mullets. Those are actually excellent if you're trawling. So this is great for bottom fishing. This is great for trolling. So. And if you enjoy catching blue crab, you could use a crab trap. I personally have never had one, but I've actually caught a blue crab on a trout magnet before, so you can catch them anyway. Now, let's talk more about the rods and reels. Let me see. So I'm a St. Croix guy myself when it comes to rods. They're sort of a little bit more expensive. They're not. It's not something you want to get as a first-time angler, because if you don't know if you actually love the sport, then it's not worth putting that much money into. But I'll tell you, St. Croix has the best rods on earth. Okuma is pretty great. You'll also notice that these don't come with a reel, so you're not just paying the $50 for this, you're also paying for a reel. This is my kind of reel. I love a good ultralight. They're smaller, easy to bend without breaking. And this is Fluger, so it's going to be smooth as silk. That action is fantastic. And on my ultralight that I personally have, I use a Fluger reel as well. And you know, the Ugly Stick is a fairly famous brand as well. But this one's $70, and it also comes with a reel, a Shakespeare reel, right? Shakespeare is typically where most people are starting off. It's got a nice drag on it, good action. Shakespeare has been around forever, and so a lot of people will start out with either a Shakespeare or a Zebco. Now, if you want to get it into the more expensive range, you buy your rod and then you buy your reel, depending on what kind of fishing you're going to do. Now, I like spinning reels. Some people like bait casters, like this. So this type of reel is called a bait caster, right? So instead of flipping a bail on this, which is the metal thing around the top of the spinning reel, instead of flipping that bail, you're going to press this down, you're going to cast, you're going to keep your thumb on top of the reel and then stop it once it hits the water. Now, one of the reasons I don't like these is because they bird's nest really easily, meaning that the line has backlash in it and it comes out so that you can't actually use the reel until that backlash is pulled out and fixed. That's why I don't prefer these, but some people love them. I grew up using spinning reels, so if someone grew up using where did I take this from? If someone grew up using a bait caster, sure, but I did not. So I prefer my spinning reels over my bait casters. My father thinks differently. He prefers a bait caster. So I hope that gave you a little primer of what you're looking for in fishing equipment, what you're looking for in bait, in lures, in lines, in hooks, and just cater everything to what kind of fishing you're going to be doing, because it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. You have to know what species you're targeting, what kind of conditions you're going to be in, and how to manage within those situations. So thank you all. It's been great talking to you. I'm Michael for To Be Entertained.